I'm going to request, Allison, that you state where you are, why your attendance in person is not reasonably practical, who, if anyone, was here or is with you, rather, and whether or not you're able to hear the proceedings.
Understood. This is Allison Mannion. I am at my home in Brookline, New Hampshire. I'm following CDC guidelines due to my positive diagnosis of COVID-19. I am alone in my room, and I can hear all proceedings.
Very good, thank you. So, for the board tonight, you can all hear Allison? Yes. Okay, and then we're going to be doing a roll call vote tonight for any votes as a result. Okay, so we'll start with agenda adjustments, and we do have a few.
Yes, I'm recommending that we move up the discussion around the primary election date while the select board is here, and then right after that, go into growth management, so those folks that have been good enough to join us tonight can get out of here, and then we'll go back to our regular agenda.
So, take a vote on that, and Allison, we'll start with you, please.
Allison, aye.
All right, Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
Tracy, aye.
Very good, so that carries 5-0. So, thank you to the select board for coming. Appreciate your flexibility tonight. And do you want us to turn it over to you to start, or do you want me to kick it off? How do you guys want to best approach this here?
I'll look to Brian, because he attended the most recent school board meeting.
So I guess for people watching, to summarize, the issues here are the fact that the town has been holding all of our elections at CSDA gym for, 20-some-odd years since the gym was built.
Before my time.
Yes. Since the gym was built. The school board now has concerns about some of the smaller elections where the schools are for the major elections, the schools are closed for the day. But for some of the smaller elections, the schools are open. At the same time, the elections are being held. And in this day and age, that raises some safety concerns for it. So we're here to try to start the process of discussing how we're figuring out how we're going to better manage this situation for the small elections going forward. Is that a fair statement?
Great. Yep. Thanks, Brian.
So.
Do you want to? Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have some.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, we finally have the primary date for January 23rd. It's my recommendation to the board that we close school that day, because I think the volume of that election will necessitate that for parking and those concerns. We have the other dates already scheduled because we had those. So our regular town election date, we have a professional development day, so there'll only be staff in the building. I think the first concern, so we have a little time, is more when we go to next year, because next year we have a primary for the governor's election. We have the election, and then we have our town election. Now, we'll do our best to coordinate our school district calendar to coordinate professional development days on those days, but contractually with our teachers, we only have so many professional development days. So that's where we run into the issue. So I think we're good for the 23rd, and I think we're definitely good for March, so I don't think there's any concern now. But I have no problem. We do our annual calendar for next year in the January, February timeframe. We can start to send that over via email to the select board, so that if we miss a date or there's something coming up, we have many months before it's approved to make that work. We're just concerned because of the way CSDA is set up. When students go to lunch, they have to cross through voting area and back, and use of bathrooms is a concern. But I think with further planning and maybe looking at a need for additional safety personnel, there could be some compromises to arrive. So it's not our intent to not utilize the schools, it's just to ensure that we keep the kids as safe as possible. And I know the select board is totally on board with that. I've had discussions with many of you. That's never been a concern. So I think we're in really good shape. But I would greatly appreciate, whether it's email or a liaison or whatever, that we do more communication just in general, so that we know what's going on and what's coming up in the schools that might be affecting the town or vice versa. And I think we'll see that with our next discussion when we talk a little bit about growth management.
I could personally make more of an kind of used to that over the last few years as it is.
Yeah, I know, I know, yeah.
Certainly wouldn't attend every meeting, but I could make an effort to try to attend every second or third meeting.
Yeah, and I certainly can reach out if we have significant things to make sure you're aware of it, and if we want to either come to your meeting or you come to, however we want to work that.
And if you have questions, please, please ask. We have a lot of resources. There are a lot of things going on in town with respect to growth ordinances and so on.
And can I suggest that we add one member from the school board and one member from the select board to the distribution of minutes? Okay, because to go and search for minutes is sometimes difficult. So if there was just one member that was, kind of responsible, they get the minutes for the select board and somebody gets the minutes for the school board, and to just kind of periodically review those, I think that would be a help too. Because during my tenure here, we've had a great relationship, and we don't want that to break down. We want to enhance it as much as we can.
That sounds like an excellent idea to me.
Okay.
Hey, Steve. You snuck in.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
I had one other
Yeah.
thought, and it's related to elections. The elections materials that were traditionally stored in the gymnasium storage closet at CSDA, we understand that the space was needed for the school. My concern is the feasibility and the cost surrounding moving the elections material back and forth between the two sites, the town hall and CSDA. Is there an opportunity for us to work together on getting some sort of storage building set up on the grounds of CSDA that allow the materials to be stored close by? I know that there's a small shed across the back parking lot from the gymnasium, and perhaps another shed placed there would allow the materials to be stored on site and set up more easily than utilizing town resources to transport those, especially the big one is the election booths themselves, very heavy to move around.
And again, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I don't see why we can't find an appropriate space for one of those sheds. If there's assistance needed this year, to bring material, we can absolutely start the day before election, that afternoon. And would be willing to volunteer custodial help in the truck as well to assist with that. So again, I think this is exactly what I hope come out of this meeting, because I think a shed makes a lot of sense. Because again, we just continue to grow, and any type of storage is at a premium.
Absolutely.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we're in budgeting cycle too, so
As are we.
I'm sure you are.
We'll let you pay for the shed.
I knew that was coming.
We won't charge you storage to put it on the property. How's that?
I would push back on that a little bit. This is Brendan Dennehy. Because the school and the gymnasium, part of the building of that facility was an agreement that that is where the town elections would be held, and therefore the town election materials should be stored where the elections are being held. And a reminder that those elections not only are the state and local, but they're also the school elections.
Right.
So,
No,
the
and I
town
agree.
manages the elections for the school districts.
No, and I agree.
I would just like to add my 2 cents. I would prefer to avoid all costs. There's certainly concerns about rising costs between the town and the schools. I would love to maintain the current storage and then offer our services of the vehicle and the individuals to move the materials for every election, because that's already part of our incorporated budget, and so we can avoid an additional cost of a storage facility. That's just
good.
my 2 cents.
That's right. Yeah. So
I guess knowing what is stored at the school, what has historically been stored at the school, which are the ballot booths and the bases for the voting machines. I find it hard to believe that there's not enough storage for those specific items, maybe 10 square feet of storage.
Storage is at a premium. We are using every square inch of all of our buildings.
So we will get through these elections that are coming up. We will take strong consideration to a storage shed on property and figure out the best way to make it happen on a regular basis into the future.
What might be appropriate for the public or to speak?
You're not really part of the public.
Yeah, as the moderator, please.
Sorry, if it's okay.
Yeah?
Peter Webb, Mason Road, Brookline. Thank you guys for being constructive, cooperative. Both boards, your job's a lot easier if you perform them in a vacuum. And it's certainly tempting to do that because the responsibilities are crushing, the hours are insane. God bless you all for doing it, but you don't work in a vacuum. You're all part of the community, and you don't have the privilege of living in a silo. Therefore, this exchange of communication is important, but don't forget your role in the town. You're part of the town, you're citizens of the town. Not only was the building paid for by the voters, but your officials are voted on by the voters, your employees, their income, and your expenditures for the schools are voted on by the voters. So I think that it's important to understand that role as a member of the community, because you don't have the pleasure, and I can understand the impulse, doing stuff in your own little silo. It's too tempting, don't go there. The planning board is doing a visioning thing for the purpose of the master plan. They send out questions, you might have gotten them. I got them today, the responses, and one person said this, I wanted to share it with you. On voting day, we all go to the school to vote. I don't know who wrote this. Symbolically, this is so important. Our children get to see the whole town being engaged in the civic process in person and up close. All the upstanding citizens, save one, in town are there helping, and people of all walks come through together. It's a symbol of the trust and goodwill that are present here in New Hampshire. So there are great practicalities that will force you to do things that a broader view of the process here might stop you from doing.
Can I please just respond to Peter? I'm going to take ownership for a lot of, I guess maybe the vitriol or the discontent that maybe is present between the two boards. Because as a member of the school board, I have had many parents come to me after every single school shooting in America, or movie theater shooting, or club shooting, or whatever shooting in America that happens quite regularly, about parental discomfort with the public coming and going throughout the day on an election day. And I believe it was our last election day, maybe it was March. I went to the good folks on the select board and, who are here to find out the days, because I knew we were going to be meeting to discuss the school calendar, and I wanted to raise that in the calendar discussion. So I think that's probably the first time that was brought up, and it was brought up in a public meeting, so it wasn't in secret, it wasn't in a silo. And I was raising my concerns as a member of the school board and as a parent in this community and as someone who's very concerned about the fact that New Hampshire no longer requires the state to recognize federal gun laws about the right to carry in school districts or in school protected school zones, like the safe school zones for drugs and tobacco. That New Hampshire has voted not to recognize those laws, that anyone can open carry in New Hampshire or concealed carry in New Hampshire and come into a school for a voting day, that our good town safety officials are on site and ready to assist, but I think we all know too well that a good person with a gun does not always stop a bad person with a gun. And I personally love the idea of small town New Hampshire and us all coming together. And, I think our kids have experienced it at Hollis Brookline High School during the evening when we have 5-hour co-op meetings. There's lots of opportunities for kids to see civic engagement and see their parents exercising their right to vote, even when school's not in session. I remember when, I lived in another town and my kids would come and they'd have like a little kids voting session, and kids would vote for, what would your vote for a movie day be? What movie do everyone want to see? And they'd have like 5 movies on the ballots, and the kids could vote on what movie they wanted to see. I think there's lots of opportunities to engage our children in the importance of civic involvement. I don't think, and I obviously didn't live in town when CSDA was funded by the taxpayers or built, but I don't think anyone, Brendan, I don't think anyone could have foreseen the America that we would live in today. And I don't think anyone could have foreseen the growth that Brookline would experience and how crowded the buildings would become and how much our space needs would grow. So respectfully, I apologize but anything that I said in public at a meeting. There was nothing said behind any board's back. I don't go to select board meetings. I just can't. I work in Massachusetts. I do my best to get here. But I think there was no ill intention. Everything that was discussed in open, in public, and behalf of the people who voted us onto this board. So I just wanted to add that.
Can I jump in if I may, Andy? So this is Member Mannion on the phone. I also want to reiterate that this is not something we are trying to do in a silo. We are trying to ensure that members of our community, our student population, are safe. My first year in Brookline, I went to go vote. I didn't really know anybody in town yet, so I'd only been here a couple months. I walked in CSDA. It could have gone left, it could have gone right. Being the upstanding citizen that I am, I didn't, but I could have, because nobody stopped me. Children were walking past me. I went in, I went out. The last election that we had, there was concern posted by the community of the back door propped open, which I know was addressed, but it still propped open. Our school calendar is publicly available, which means while we might have upstanding citizens throughout Brookline, it doesn't stop somebody from outside of our town from showing up knowing that our schools are in session and we're having voting. And I was able to walk in. So that means if somebody wanted to, they could. We're just living in a different America. And with those concerns, brought up our conversations of not wanting schools open for election day. It wasn't necessarily we can't possibly host voting for the town, and we're not trying to cut the town out. And if it was perceived that way, we do apologize. This is strictly from a school safety standpoint, looking at our growth, looking at how accessible that was. And I remember looking at my husband and saying, if our child was here, I would have gone to the office and pulled her from the school from the day, watching the amount of traffic in and out. So this is coming from an area of concern, an area of awareness of what's going on in the country, concern from other parents, as Kelly said, that were have expressed concerns to us. We do not, if we recognize that there could potentially be a problem, let's not wait for an issue to arise. Let's proactively protect all of the citizens in our community. Thank you.
So I would just like to mention, we had said that we were going to look at next year, right, and look at the calendar and things like that. Since we are both in budget season, do we have to think about doing that at this point? Because if we are going to close schools, if that is the plan going forward while we're all here, is that going to be a budget impact for our schools, for busing, for, you know, do we have to look at that? I don't want to, I don't want to get into a situation where, you know, we need to have another conversation, or are those conversations that we should have, you know, in the months coming up, or is that something we should address right now?
I don't think there'll be any financial impact. I did check with the bus company.
Oh, great.
The way our contract is written, we could have one of the 3 districts closed and the other 2 could run. The bigger concern would be daycare, because many older children are the ones who watch younger children on election days, because many parents still have to go to work. But I don't think there'll be any financial impact other than the piece which we already have budget would be to transport the equipment if we decide to go that route. Or I would say it'd be a limited impact on our 2 budgets if we shared the cost of a shed. I don't see a shed being that much in the way of, you know, a budget item that could be found.
If I may, just to make one final note, I don't know if I'm being picked up on the microphone or not, but I think it was received that the schools were trying to separate from the town in regards to the election, so I'm glad to hear that that's not the case. I think working together, building a better line of communication with some sort of liaison between the 2 boards is imperative to continue. And I like the idea of sharing minutes. I know that at the beginning of every select board meeting, select board members review the various folders, one of which is a mail folder. We see hearing notices and things like that. It would be helpful to be able to review the school board minutes in there as well. Get a better understanding of what you all do, because we know what we do. I don't know what you all do. But moving forward, the town really doesn't have another option for elections. These are the people's buildings, so I think it's important that we work together on creating a school calendar that works around election days, you know, working together, whatever your timeline is to make that happen when you need to figure out the calendar for the following year. Please communicate with us, and we will provide the information that you need of when elections will be held and what type. Obviously, with the primary, it's a tough one because we don't necessarily know the date until, you know, a month or 2 ahead of time. But yeah, I think we have a good thing going here, and we should just work to continue the relationship that we have.
I've had a couple of people say to me, and I'm like, it's not up to me, but people have asked me, like, what about the new Department of Public Works building up at the transfer station, or the safety complex as, like, alternate sites?
So, yeah, I've considered all of our options. For the DPW building, the problem is there's no parking. That's really the basic issue with all of the town facilities, is there's just not enough parking to be able to support an election. The safety complex might potentially, it's got a bit more parking than the others, but the only big space that it has is the big ambulance bay. We can't ask our election workers to hold an election in an open bay in the middle of winter, in January and such. Plus, there's also the concern that if we were to hold it at the safety complex, you've got a number of cars, at certain times of the day that are coming and going constantly. That creates a bit of a traffic jam. You really don't want that at your ambulance and police station. So there's a safety concern there for that. But mostly the issue is really parking and an available inside room that's large enough for it. Those are the 2 elements that we're kind of missing all of our facilities.
Great, yeah, I just was passing it along as a suggestion. I don't have any money in that game.
Yes.
Brian, is there not enough parking at the transfer station? So if you had the DBW as the site, use the parking that people use for the transfer station.
Yes. So there's a few issues with the DPW. Obviously, parking is a big one. Election days, typically Tuesdays. It's when the transfer station is open. And we hear enough grief when we try to close the transfer station for needed equipment maintenance. Closing it for voting would be difficult. The other issue, though, is the building is set up for equipment maintenance and repairs and storage, not set up for a municipal use of any other nature. You know, there's large equipment stored inside, vehicle lifts, there's materials around, hazardous tools and such. It's not an environment that is welcoming, nor is it safe for the general public to be walking through. You know, we have our touch-a-truck that's set up and monitored safely, but speaking with the former DPW director, it's not a direction that the department sees as being a safe alternative for the public.
Thanks.
I want to add on that a little bit. The DPW building itself is largely just garage bays. So again, they're cold spaces with just big garage doors opening. The actual office space in there, if you put the 3 or 4 rooms that are in there combined, it's probably about the size of this room, but it's divided up into like, three, a break room and a couple of office spaces. There's no space in that heated area to be able to hold an election for it. And again, with the bays, I would really not want to ask somebody to be sitting out there in the bay in the middle of January all day long to run the elections. So those are the concerns we have.
The only question, Brian, if you could evaluate the space we're in as potential voting site, and let me know if that size works, because this is very isolated.
This library
This
space?
library,
Where we are right now.
if it was empty, would it be big? And it may not be, and that's fine. But it just allows me to isolate students upstairs.
I'll be honest with you, the gymnasium at CSDA is sometimes a little tight.
And that's fine, that's what I needed to hear, because I'm not that familiar with the election.
Not so much for local elections. Local elections, we have a smaller number
Yep.
of voting booths required, but for especially presidential
Yeah, no,
elections.
I mean, it would have to be over there. I just meant like the local election, and again, I don't know.
I don't think we could make it work
Okay.
between having the ballot clerks and the supervisor of the checklists, the actual voting booths, the voting machines, the various people that are needed to be there to monitor, and we are required to have a public area that individuals can come in and watch
That's
the
right.
process, and it has to be a certain number of feet from everything else, which is typically the roped area, the corral, for a lack of a better term,
Yep.
in the middle of the room. There's really, I mean, even CSDA is tight at times.
No, that's fine, I just wanted to ask because it gives me another segment of keeping the students away.
Also, another issue with here would be the parking here, because we've got enough parking for the elections or for all the students, or for all the teachers and staff, but both at RNOS would be, I think, would be at the same time would be an issue.
Okay, super.
Peter Webb again. I haven't heard, so I don't appreciate why school can't be canceled.
Well, that would be our primary piece, but there are years where we have traditionally held school on the smaller elections.
And perhaps that's not a good idea.
Well, and it's just, I think the environment is changing, so having kids at home is better. But it's also that you have to understand that we're 3 separate unique districts, and everybody has to agree, because the easiest and most affordable transportation is the shared transportation. So there is kind of a budgetary impact long-term, but in our present contract, Brookline could have a day off, Co-op and Hollis could be in session, and there'd be no additional cost.
Right, so I think the tricky part is that Hollis votes at the Lawrence Barn.
Right.
And
Not always.
No.
But for like these smaller,
One of 4 elections,
for the smaller municipal
that's
elections.
one.
Yep.
There are 3 others. They will close for those 3. So we're talking about the one.
I think that's primarily the
So,
one that we're.
Yeah, so if you look at next school year, I have to figure out what I'm going to do on September 10th. I believe that's the governor primary, right? And then November 5th. And then March 11th. So in a year like this, historically, the other 2 districts refuse to approve a calendar where there is either a professional development day or no school on March 11th, given that we plan to close September 10th and November 5th, because those are the ones where we'd be voting both at the high school and at CSDA. And so for March, because they use the Lawrence Barn, there's a refusal on their part. And that's when we try to hold the election at CSDA while school is in session, and that's where, concerns begin.
Perhaps we could speak with the Haas folks. This has been explored in depth.
Year after year.
So I've been doing this for 9 years. This came up for the last primary cycle about 4 or 5 years ago with an entirely different board aside from myself, with the concern around the gun violence too. We ultimately came to the compromise around trying to increase the police presence and security force, and what we're talking tonight sounds like that's likely where we're going to have to look at again. But it's the primary cycle that is the gotcha that happens, where we fall out of sync with the SAU with all 3 districts.
Or the state primary.
Right.
So another thought, if this space doesn't work, the RMS gym actually has the bathrooms within the facility. That can be better isolated than the CSDA gym, because you can enter from the back. It's handicap accessible. You're right, the parking is not as...
What kind of dollars are involved in this transportation disruption such that we would consider an inadequate, inferior spot?
So it's not so much the dollars, it's also the fact that you have children, maybe one at CSDA and one at the middle school, and now your children have a different school calendar that impacts the last day of school, and that's a huge thing for families. So there are far more implications than simply running the buses, and we hear from everybody. And it's usually, how do we do what's best for kids and get it passed by enough board members to make it pass, because we certainly are typically making someone upset with every calendar.
It's a sorry statement that fear is such a consideration in all of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think going back to the issue, the statement that we're making, that was being made earlier about shared responsibilities, I certainly agree with that, and I believe it's also our responsibility as the select board to be concerned with the safety of our children in our schools. Okay, so this really does go both ways. You have to be concerned with our democratic foundations and the process, and we have to be concerned with the safety of our children. So these are not mutually exclusive. They're shared community values that we have to work through here. When we look at the expenses, though, I do want you to be able to fully appreciate and understand that if we start to have elections where we don't have a facility for it, it really forces the town into a situation where we have to build a new facility just to hold the elections. And we're talking multi-million-dollar, you need a good-sized space, large parking area, you need the land for it, that sort of thing. So when we're looking at the costs here, we want to balance that against what the expenses would be if we had to build a new facility to completely separate from the schools. Or even if it was just once every couple of years, that's an enormous amount of expense, and I don't see another alternative to it. None of our existing buildings, or none of our existing facilities have space that we could expand parking into. There are certain buildings that are like, okay, we've got a room there, but there's like no place around to be able to expand the parking, and we can't, so I'm not sure how we would deal with that. So when we're looking at the expenses, the busing expenses and whatnot, we need to balance that against the alternative.
Agreed, but I think whenever we get to our next conversation about growth management, if we begin to consider the potential for growth in terms of changing the structure of the buildings or building a new property, then I think a huge consideration should be also creating an opportunity for community gathering that is better separated from school, so that it could be part of the school, but also separated better in terms of complete separation from school and community.
Long term, I completely agree with that. That's a few years, that's several years, and millions of dollars that we have to work out with the voters to get from here to there. But I do agree with you, that is really the best long-term. My personal experience is that that's probably our best long-term solution, but that's not happening in the next couple of years.
No, but I think we can build off of tonight's conversation. I think we put enough things in place. We know we're set for voting for this year. We know we're going to communicate earlier than in the past regarding next year and figure out solutions that will make both boards comfortable, because I think both boards are, all about the safety of the kids. And I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that the select board has never, ever denied something that wasn't going to enhance stuff for kids. We've always been supportive, so I don't want that to be a message that comes out of this meeting. It's more of, we'll build off of this, it will solve this problem, and in a couple of years, if we are doing some expansion for the schools, the best way to go may be to build a new gym and make classrooms in the old gym, because that's a very affordable fix compared to building new classrooms. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. One last thing. First, Andy, I wanted to just clarify, for January 3rd, 2024, that's going to be a day off across the SAU?
It's
23rd.
23rd.
Oh, 23rd.
Yeah. I believe that will be a day off. I can't guarantee that. I have two other boards to vote, but I presented it to them, and it didn't go that badly. But at the same time, I think this board has spoken loud and clear. So checking with the bus company and realizing there's no cost, and the only pushback we'll get is the daycare issue, which is big. I understand that. I remember when I had my oldest one babysitting the youngest one because we had to go to work, but I'm sure we can overcome that.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify
Yep.
that. And then the other thing, I appreciate your comments, Brian. I guess I want to understand, and I know none of you are on the Hollis Select Board, and I know none of you are Hollis election officials, but I've been in the Lawrence Barn a lot for lots of kids' activities and municipal things, and I've seen the parking lot around the Lawrence Barn and the Nichols lot next door. And when I think about the space of the Lawrence Barn, and Hollis, I think, has more people than Brookline does, I just don't understand how they are able to accomplish a voting day in the Lawrence Barn with that space, the size of that building, and the parking available there. And we're saying that, and what I hear is that the only available solution in Brookline is CSDA Gymnasium, which is probably at least twice the size of the Lawrence Barn.
Hollis doesn't use Lawrence Barn for all of its elections.
No, but but
Only
let's
for
talk.
one of its
Okay, so, and that's
It's
the.
not big enough for most of its elections.
Okay, so if we're talking about the March election, which is, I think, where they
They have it in
vote.
Lawrence Barn.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand, if we're comparing our March election and their March election, which is the town election, comparing apples and apples, because I think that's the one day that we're in session and they're not. I mean, we're not in session and they are, or we'd like to not be in session. I'm trying to anticipate questions that I'm gonna hear from people.
There's a fair amount of parking at the Lawrence Barn, which we don't have at any of the other town facilities. All of the other town facilities have very limited parking, again, except for the safety complex. The safety complex probably has parking that fairly comparable to it, but it doesn't have an indoor space. The actual indoor spaces there are all small rooms, and it was kind of designed to be that way. It's small office spaces. There's not a big public space in there. There's one room, but it's a small fraction of the size of this room that's there. The only other option is the big bays where the ambulances are, which are not heated. And all of the other spaces, town facilities don't have parking anywhere near that.
I think we even explored the rec center, and the handicap accessibility, because it wasn't paved, was a problem. So as a private, this is years ago when we looked at this. So, I mean, I know.
What do you mean by rec center?
The event center?
The event center, I'm sorry,
Oh,
right
center.
at the town line.
Yeah.
So to me, it sounds like we have to, we've talked about, laid out the communication. I think we need to engage with the safety team around
Yep.
school safety and how we can beef that up. That to me seems like a logical next step here. effort would be appreciated as well.
With that in mind, I recall years ago, there was a expandable fence that was brought up, kind of at the top of the sloped portion of CSDA. I have not seen that being used in recent years when school is in session during voting. I think that should be explored. The idea of kind of going back to a COVID era of lunches, bringing lunches to the students in the classrooms could be explored. These are things that I've heard from residents. I understand that it's under your purview, and you may see complications with that I don't. But there are most likely security enhancements that could be done to the schools that would enable us to have school in session while voting is being conducted at the CSDA facility. It really comes down to the availability of space, the availability of parking, and keeping the kids safe. So I think there's room to work here, whether we get the entire SAU on board with having a day off, or we make security enhancements to our facility to enable both actions to be done simultaneously. We can keep this line of communication open and find a resolution that works for everybody. And you're never going to make everybody happy.
Exactly.
But we all know that.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Flexibility in coming in, and we'll stay engaged here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember to vote.
That's good.
I'd like to stay around for the growth management. We also have another piece of business to conduct tonight, so. No, what I would like to do is just keep the select board in session and kind of take a back seat here, listen to the growth management discussion, and then we can just take care of our business further on.
Right.
Here, Rosie.
Here we go. Thank you.
All right. So thanks as well to the planning board team coming this evening as well. We've got all sorts of contributions, so we appreciate that very much. Do you want to show here?
Yeah, I could. I'm town planner, and this is Alan Rosenberg, who's one of the co-chairs of the planning board.
And also chair of the capital improvements committee.
And Steve Russo, who sits on, who is the select board representative, who sits on the planning board as well. Which is why I have only 2 members. So hopefully they're all watching from home, but not engaging. One of the reasons why I was wanting to come talk with you guys, Colleen and I have been talking about ways of improving communication, and it seems like that is really timely for everybody. It's really important that there are a few spots where the planning department and the school boards really do need to work really closely together, and one of them is, as you guys have already noted, is around growth management. We do have a growth management ordinance in place right now in Brookline, and that is designed to slow growth, not put brakes on, but just slow it, to allow the school district in particular to evaluate, develop, and implement a plan for the increases in services so that they could be growing in a really timely manner. So they're growing about the same rate as our population. So that when we do take the brakes off and the growth management ordinance sunsets, that we have adequate capacity. And Colleen very kindly came to the planning board and discussed some information with the planning board on what the capacity is of the 2 schools here in Brookline are and what the NASDAQ projections are, and gave us a little tutorial about how the NASDAQ projections work, which is really helpful. And one of the things she talked about is that it is, and if there are errors, it's all in my understanding.
Not necessarily.
But the NASDAQ projections are based on birth rates
many things, including birth rates and building permits. So you know kind of like when a kid is born, that, you know, someday you're going to have a kindergartner. That's the progression. And then when you have a building permit for a single-family home, you're likely to have students in the school district. That's that progression. The only way to recertify the growth management ordinance every year is to, for the planning board to find that the conditions that led to the growth management ordinance, which was the prediction that we're going to have more students than we've got capacity for, remains in place. But it's also really important to be not just evaluating that there's a problem, but making a plan and then implementing that plan. Because the growth management ordinance legally cannot be in place forever. There has to be a balance between the rights of the landowner, the rights of the abutters, and the rights of the community. So this is a very delicate balance. We have heard that you got from the presentation that in 2027, it looks like RMS is going to have approximately 28 more students than you have capacity for. And that's provided that there's no other changes in the environment than what NASDAQ 40 predicts. So we understand that you guys have been thinking about this. We are sitting in a new space that was carved out from this building to allow for more classroom spaces, but that has been essentially used up. That capacity is pretty much done. So it still looks like, from what we understand, is that in 2027, we're going to have 28 more students than we have seats for. And it's not, the NASDAQ projections that we saw for RMS aren't getting better, they're only getting tighter. So it's really important that the planning board this year hear from the SAU regarding capacity, and it's really important that we hear about a plan. And I know that you guys have had a presentation. I watched it. I even got the slides from and watched along while I was listening, which was really, really helpful. But without a plan, the growth management can't stay in place. So there could be lots of different sort of levels of plans. There could be a plan A where specials go traveling and that classroom space is reused. It could be portables put in, it could be classrooms are built, it could be time shifts. I mean, planning is my thing, but not necessarily for capacity for schools. So I expect that there might be lots of different plans depending on how these 28 students appear. If there's 28 new kindergartners, that's going to be a really different plan than maybe if they're evenly distributed against all grades. I get that. But the planning board really needs to hear what the plan is. And a plan is written down, and a plan needs to be shared, and it has to have some deadlines and maybe a budget, milestones, all the normal things for a plan. Because now's the time where I'm going to set your hair on fire. If I haven't already.
And Michelle, before you set our hair on fire, which I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. So what was presented to you was the plan, if needed, based on those projections, without any multi-unit housing included in that. And certainly, both the principals have looked at an interim solution to building 5 classrooms. Is it 5? I don't have it in front of me right now, but the classroom.
It was 5 classrooms in the EEI presentation,
Yeah.
but I understand you guys haven't voted to.
No, we have not, because our budget is year by year, so we're not going to approve that. So both principals have looked at interim solutions, which may or may not be ones that the voters would appreciate. So, I mean, certainly we could go over what both of you looked at. So there's all sorts of plans, and they're all contingent on actual numbers, which we don't know until the students come. So we can lay out a plan A, a plan B.
26 letters of the alphabet.
We can lay out plan C. I mean, at your planning board meeting, there was talks about, well, what about when we're fully
Built
at
out.
capacity, built out, that's a term you all use.
That's
I don't
what
think
we
I think we need to like really focus our energies on the upcoming next 5 to 10 years, which
Great idea.
hopefully we won't, so I think there are, but we're not gonna be able to tell you that we're going to put this in the budget for 2025, 2026 until we can't ask a town that's already very upset by budget and taxes to build 5 classrooms unless we actually have hard evidence that we need that. So there's always going to be an interim plan, which is not going to be a good one for students at all. It's going to involve carts, it's going to involve portable classrooms, it's going to involve special ed classrooms where you're going to have OT, PT, speech, and a reading specialist delivering services to students all at the same time with disabilities. So probably not the most ideal. So I feel like we need to hear from the people of the town about how they feel about this interim plan, because the next thing really would be then, and please speak up because I'm not.
Where's that plan? Where's the-
This is just a memo that we have about an interim thing. We can go over that if you want, but I want to hear from
I don't
Michelle.
know where that.
No, you haven't seen it yet.
So we did
Because
something.
we're not allowed to share in between meetings,
Right.
so.
Right, because we don't have a lot of communication in between.
No, because it's an
We're not
electronic
allowed
meeting.
to have meetings in between and share documents, yes,
We
that's right.
are, if we have committees, we could.
No, it's an electronic meeting if it's a quorum.
If I
but-
share this with everybody,
right.
it would have been a meeting.
So the 2 points I struggling with a little bit. So 3 years ago now, we all collectively met, we were all on this committee together, right?
We were.
So we came up with a plan, we went through this, we built the space we're in. So I don't want it to sound like there's been no look at this, because we had a whole town services committee, we did this, and now it's the next,
2,000
right?
pages of documents. I was
You
there.
lived it, I know you did.
Yeah.
So that was quite a summer.
We had 37 public meetings in that summer.
So.
We saw each other a lot.
And then the other thing I continue to struggle with this is that with growth management, the town shoulders the burden as opposed to the new people that come in. So we're built out. So anything's going to be multi-million-dollar type thing that the town is going to have to pay for, those that live here, as opposed to the people that are coming in. And I just hope that there's some way that we can balance that.
There is.
Okay.
But we need you guys to be our partners to make that happen.
Okay,
And I think
wonderful.
that-
Yep.
Do you want me to talk about what the gross numbers are, or do you want to jump into this?
So you can
Is
start with the
everybody
numbers,
Yeah, go ahead, do
Okay.
it.
and then we can talk about how it will all look.
Well, if you just look at census data for Brookline population, and that's what, just the American Community Survey, which is the surveys that are done between censuses, because we're a town of over 5,000, we do get our population measured every year. Between 2022 and 2023, we had a 5.7% increase. However, if you look at the HUD numbers, which is regional, so that is, Nashua is considered kind of the center, but then it kind of comes all the way down here to the border. Our regional number was between 2010 and 2022, they just keep adding it on, 8.3%. And Brookline, in those 12 years, was the winner by far with a 17% growth rate. 17%. So what happens is that growth rate, we're still feeling the effects of that, even though we have asked to slow the growth in town, we are still feeling the effects of that because those houses were built. Those bedrooms are full because people apparently move into a house with 5 bedrooms and say, oh, I need to fill every bedroom. And we have kids who are born and those kids turn into kindergartners 5 years later. It's magic. So that's the effect we're experiencing right now. I expect that at some point it's going to slow down because we have had slower growth rates in our building permits. But they haven't come to a dead stop by any means.
Michelle, was the 5.7% growth, was that just in
1
one
year.
year?
In
So
1
that
year.
was 21 to 22?
No, 22 to 23. So
Oh.
it could go up. It just,
Yeah, we just got a census packet in the mail.
oh, please fill it out.
I'm a good citizen, of course I will.
I love data. Okay, so you were asking, Ken, about how do we invite the people who are building dwellings right now to shoulder their share of the burden of growth.
Great.
Well, we do that here in town with impact fees. And impact fees are assessed onto new dwellings, new homes. And that's where they pay for their portion of the growth. But in order for that to happen, the capital projects need to be in the capital improvements plan. And that's where I'm gonna turn it over to Alan.
And that's exactly where I was gonna go, is, state RSAs allow towns to offset costs caused by growth, to municipal facilities, including schools, by being able to charge what are called impact fees in order to do some cost recovery. However, in order for the town to legally charge an impact fee, the project has to be documented in the capital improvements plan. And that has to include some sort of budget figure. 5 million, 10 million, $270 billion, whatever it happens to be. For capital planning purposes, it does not have to be the exact number of the project. You have to at least get in the ballpark. Because everyone knows that plans go through iterations, things change, costs will change depending upon, if there's a delay in the project or whatever.
As the number goes up?
Never goes down. So really kind of what you need to do is make your, best educated guess, backed up with some sort of, either facts or intelligent guesses. My suggestion would be to plan for worst case. So if, say in 2027, 2028, when RMS will be approximately 53 students over capacity, rather than, you may decide to, have carts and, switch things around and stuff, but maybe the worst case is to do an addition with 5 classrooms. That's the project that you should plan. That's the project that should be submitted to the Capital Improvements Committee, so it can be added into the plan. That way, when the time does come to implement the project, maybe it's not 5 classrooms, maybe it's 3, but the fact that the project is in the Capital Improvements Plan would allow the town to charge impact fees to do some cost recovery from the growth.
Great.
The reason we have a CIP, just one second, the reason we have the CIP is to allow us to more evenly plan so that we don't have a new fire truck, a new 5 new classrooms, a new ambulance, a new wing on the town hall, a new story on the town hall, whatever it is, they're not all in the same year.
Right.
We want to keep our tax rate as even as possible so that when one bond falls off, we can slip in another one so that our tax rate stays even. That's the goal of the CIP.
My question is, if we're projecting for '27, do you want to plan in '24?
Yes, because it's 10 years.
Yes.
Right, so you want, okay, because this is slightly different than during my tenure here, okay? So you would rather have in there $3.5 million for 5 classrooms at CSDA submitted to you next summer, so that, and then we would.
Actually, 2 months ago.
Right now, if you've got the information, right now.
Well, see that's the difficulty, is we're on different calendars.
And we'll take it at any time.
Yep.
As long as it's got the data.
Okay.
Any time.
But then, my expectation would be that then I would be asking taxpayers for a warrant in '26.
Could be. And we might, in the
But-
interim, we might adjust it. Every year, you have the opportunity to adjust it.
Right,
Either
no,
adjust the
I-
amount or
Right.
adjust the
Right.
timeline. You have that
Right.
option.
Right, but I agree with you, but-
The CIP planning window is
Yep.
a 6-year rolling window.
Yep.
So if you have a project that you are anticipating for anywhere in that window, it needs to be part of the plan.
Okay, but my question is, who decides the priority of the plan? Because if I need that building in 27, are you telling me when I can put it on the warrant, or is it still the school board?
No. So the way that it works is the project, the details of the project are submitted to the Capital Improvements Committee. We review the details. When you submit the project, you would also make a recommendation that, it would be necessary, or, God forbid, it's urgent, it needs to be done right away. The committee will review the data. There may be some dialogue back and forth with questions. Then the committee itself will also do a rating. So based on the data, it could be, it could require some more research, it could be urgent, or it could be inconsistent with what the town has stated it wants based on the master plan.
And then,
It in no way controls when you would put something on the warrant.
but at the same time, it would be prudent to delay a potential warrant to get it on the CIP, because then you can charge impact fees.
It's the other way around. You want to have the project in the capital improvements plan before you put the warrant before the town.
Right, well, that's because we were potentially gonna have a warrant for March,
Okay.
but that wouldn't do you any good for impact fees.
When do you start?
So that's why I'm saying,
charging impact
if we
Oh,
delayed it,
But you don't have, you haven't built the project yet.
but the projects, we're in budget season right now, and we're gonna talk about the budget, and
Sure.
we have discussions around about $1 million bond. In,
For building something because of,
well, all the infrastructure, which still, to me, could be something that you charge impact
So,
fees.
no.
Okay,
So impact fees can only be charged for things specifically related to growth.
okay.
So things like replacing a roof, resurfacing a parking lot are
Not
are
impact,
not
right.
tied to growth, so
Right.
you can't charge an impact fee for those. So while from a budgeting perspective, the committee has appreciated the fact that the SAU has included all of those maintenance items in their submittals in the past. It would be much more helpful to have the projects related to growth added to the plan.
Got it.
Makes sense.
So when would impact fees start? Like a developer comes in and they wanna do a, say a 20 house
even if they
development.
wanted to do one house.
Right, okay,
But
sorry,
no.
even if they wanted to do one house, right, and we have the 5 classroom addition, right, on the set for 2027.
Okay.
If that house is going to impact and have an impact on that, can we start charging impact fees right away for, say,
When you build, you can't do it proactively, it has to be like once the project
And
is
the,
going.
so impact fees can start right away for anything related to growth?
When
for
we
any-
build when we break
when
ground
we
here,
start
not when they're
building
building,
here
but
is
when
what
we're
I'm hearing.
building
Right.
here.
Oh,
When we
okay.
actually start spending money, you can start charging impact
Yes.
fees.
it is the
But
impact,
there's a process to it, like there's
Yeah,
formulas.
well, you wanna have it
Yep.
ahead of
There's
time,
some
yeah.
serious math that has to go on.
yep. And are those impact fees used to offset the school's bond?
You guys get checks from us every year
I know.
already.
I know, I'm just-
That's exactly the same thing that
Right,
would happen.
that's the exact
It would
same
just
process.
be-
Yes.
Right, that's all,
Instead of
just
being
want,
middle school, it would be RMMS.
Yep.
Instead of being
Yep.
CSDA, it might be RMMS.
okay.
So we'd still raise and appropriate $2 million to the town, but you would give us potentially a $400,000 check at some point that would offset eventually.
You get a little check every year.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, I was going big. I was hoping they were really gonna throw some.
And they just pay for
They don't
everything.
have to pay all of
Yeah,
it,
right.
they have to
They
pay
have to
their
pay their-
portion of
I got it.
And you want the same information I would expect for the co-op,
We would.
okay? And you would take care of working with the town to factor those impact fees for the two towns?
Right now, we have an impact fee for the middle school.
Right, I know, yeah. I'm just thinking, because that growth that we're gonna get here is gonna go there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what happens. They not only
Right,
turn into
right.
kindergarten.
Well,
could start
but they
here.
turn into-
Yeah. Well, you know, the biggest balancing act, though, is the concern with overbuilding.
Right, you want to
Because-
have, it needs to be the Goldilocks, just enough, but not too much.
Right, and the problem is, again, during my 10 years, we're very much economic dependent. So if the economy goes south, we tend to see us go south, and that's what my concern is. It's nice that NASDAQ's projections are showing what they're showing, but I was also, when I started here, we were in a tough economic times, and everybody was moving out,
Sure.
you know? So it's just that balancing act of trying to get the Goldilocks, you know?
Right.
I agree.
But remember, Brookline, 17% growth rate in the last 12 years.
Oh, I know.
We're not going down.
Oh.
But, and NASDAQ also hasn't figured into what has happened in the town.
Which,
Sorry.
what she's gonna talk about next.
Can I,
Yep.
can I ask a question?
You can ask as many as you like, there's never a limit.
I'm looking at the capital improvement plan for 23 to 28, and and where I'm just trying to understand.
Okay.
Like if I'm looking at these,
It's pretty long.
yep, if I'm looking at these tables where it says, I just lost it, where I was. Like the column that says source of funds. So if it was something that was eligible for impact fees, would that source of funds, instead of being like operating budget, would that be?
It would be whatever, whatever the, whatever money you would use to implement the project.
Okay,
So typically for building, it's some sort of a construction bond.
okay,
So the source of funding for the project would be the bond.
okay,
And then the way that the bond would be paid off would be through a combination of, property taxes on, on new
Everything.
and existing properties, plus, if there was an impact fee assessed for the project, the impact fee is.
okay, cool. I was just, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's nothing on here that's getting impact fees.
No.
So I just want, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah,
We
and
also can't
actually, I
predict
think,
exactly
Right.
how much is gonna, like, we know kind of how much is gonna be raised over time in general, but, because we know kind of on average how many building permits we have per year. But we don't know, are they all gonna come in, the next 5 years, and then it's gonna slow down?
Right.
Or how that's gonna happen, we don't know the exact number. So the exact amount of the check is always a little bit mysterious and exciting.
How fun.
Okay. It sounded like there was a more excitement that you were about to share
Oh,
with
yes,
us.
but I
Okay.
thought I had more questions.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Thanks.
you're on fire time.
Okay, the capital improvements plan is very interesting reading. And you can kind of see what the sort of scope is of all of it. And you can see, I have posted on the planning board website historic ones, so you can see how things change over time and how projects move a little bit here and there. So next, we do have some units that have not been accounted for, some housing units that have not been accounted for in the NASDAQ projections because they're only looking at building permits that have been issued. So I think it's really important for you guys to have this information. So I'm going to talk about units that have been approved, not built, and I'm looking at all units, whatever kind or flavor they are, as long as they're dwelling units, and dwelling unit is just where people live. And then some that are likely to be built before 2027, but so far at the moment, we don't have an application, but they've started some part of the process of planning. And then I'd like to end up with some logistics that Colleen and I've talked about, but I think it would be great to get some input, see what you guys think. Right now, we have a number of housing for older persons developments, and I want to answer as many questions as you guys have about housing for older persons, because I think there's a lot of mystery, and there doesn't need to be. Transparent is my favorite color, so any question you have, there's no dumb question, ask away. Housing for older persons in Brookline is 55 plus. Other towns have different numbers. In Brookline, that's 55 plus. That means that one person in that household needs to be 55 or older. Everybody else could be younger. One person needs to be 55. As soon as that gets sold to this first person who's 55 plus, they need to sell it to somebody else who's 55 plus, because every year I'm going to be getting a certification, maybe their birth certificate, maybe something else, that certifies that they are 55 plus. Every year I get to see this. So I will ensure that that happens. We do have one housing for older persons that has been approved. It's had some hiccups legally, slowed down because of unhappy abutter who has a right to appeal, and we're in the appeal process. Hopefully by Christmas we'll have an answer one way or the other. That is 8 duplexes and 1 single family home. One of the important pieces of information to keep in mind about housing for older persons in Brookline is that we do have a limit of 2 bedrooms. Doesn't mean how many people you can fit in those bedrooms. I'm not going to ask. But so 8 duplexes, 1 single family home, all 2 bedrooms, approved, not yet built.
Michelle, if I may.
You may.
8 duplexes means 16 dwelling units, correct?
16 dwelling units, yes.
Times 2 bedrooms?
Times 2 bedrooms, and then 1 single family home times 2 bedrooms. We have an open space development off of Route 13. You guys might have noticed this because they clear cut the lot, and it's right next to the old quarry, so you might notice the what looks like a fire pond. And I say open space development, so that means that those lots are a little bit smaller. So it's 7 lots, 6 are dwelling lots, 6 are for houses, 1 is for open space, but they tend to be smaller lots. They're an acre-ish, a little more than an acre, but not huge. So 6 houses.
That's not a
Hops
hop.
or,
That is just a regular,
Oh.
plain vanilla open space development.
Regular house.
Do you mean how big, how many bedrooms?
No
could be
idea.
whatever they
Whatever
want,
now.
right?
Yeah.
They have a little more than an acre, so pretty. And then we have over 30 lots right now that are from previously approved subdivisions that were approved before the growth management ordinance. So over 30 of those. We're whittling that 62 number down, but it's over 30 right now. Some of those lots haven't had their frontage road built yet, but some of them have. So I would expect that all of those will be built in the near future.
again, just to be clear, regular houses. We're out of hops, okay. So
Out of hops.
30 plus family, okay.
And they're all, and those last 30 are on regular subdivisions, so larger lots, 2 plus 2 acres-ish, some of them as many as 5, depending on the back lots, but larger homes generally on traditional subdivisions than you have on an open space subdivision. All right, now these are likely dwelling units to be built before 2027. And these are all housing for older persons. Once again, in Brookline, 55 plus, 1 person, 55 plus, and 2 bedrooms. We have 58 units that are going up in Route 13. I don't know, other than no more than 2 bedrooms, what those are gonna look like. Adjacent to that is another 30 housing for older persons. No more than 2 bedrooms, but that one appears to be single-family homes, but we haven't actually seen that at the planning board. Only another board has seen that. And then there's a 3 apartment building housing for older persons that's going in. So I'm anticipating that in these, given that we have about half a student per dwelling unit, yes, they're small, so maybe this is overestimating. I tend to prefer to be overestimating the situation. 46 more students in the school system just from those units by 2027. Now, we also talked about, and Colleen, we talked about this at the meeting, all of this housing for older persons sounds great because it's only 2 bedrooms. But what happens if every single one of these housing for older persons unit is somebody from Brookline downsizing? So you go from a couple, or maybe one person who's single parenting with a kid in high school, moving out of a 4-bedroom house into this 2-bedroom housing for older persons unit, and now you have a 3, 4, 5-bedroom house that's on market. So I hope your hair isn't fine.
So the 58 units, 30 units, and 3, are all of those approved?
They
Or-
have not been started yet, but I expect that by 2027 they will be.
When you say not started, do you mean?
They haven't come to the planning board yet.
Okay, got it.
But they have gone through some kind of other first step. So we know they're coming, we just don't know exactly when.
Were they all before the growth management ordinance?
None of them have been before the growth management ordinance, but I will tell you, none of these are subject to the growth management.
They're not, okay.
So the 46 students, Michelle,
That's the estimate.
is that including the approved not built and the likely to be
No,
built, or that's
those are
just?
the likelies.
Okay, and how many from the approved not built? That's included in NESDAQ, the approved not built?
They haven't had building permits yet.
Okay.
So they have not been included in that unless they're somewhere else in Brookline.
Did we say they're not?
So do you know what the estimate from the approved not builts are?
Well, it's 17 plus 6. That's just the, I know you, because we have approximately 30 single-family homes.
That's
Maybe-
15 kids. I mean, with a half.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then we
which
have
those are-
That's not gonna be a half.
the 6 lots, the 6 houses that are going into the subdivision. And then the 17 units for the housing for older persons. And that is only 2 bedroom, but like I said, I don't know how to build it. Okay.
Right.
And I think the other thing we need to think about too is just looking at the hops. If we're looking at the 30 hops, for instance, that's 30 potential dwellings in Brookline
Yes.
that are now up for sale
Right.
for additional students too.
So think about
Yeah.
permit crafts, we're just moving our,
Yep. Nice domino effect.
Move into a new ship.
moving to a new shop.
Yeah.
And I have reached out to other town planners to ask about what their experience is with COPS and how many students really are there.
Right.
Because a lot of people will tell me, and have told me this over and over again, oh, you're not gonna get any.
That's what they said at the planning board meeting, yeah.
And yet, every town planner I talk to says, well, not everyone has, like I said, 55 plus, that's Brookline's flavor of housing for older persons. It's not the case in every community. But all the other town planners are like, oh, that's information I'd like to know too. So when you find out, Michelle, you can tell them. So there are housing for older persons that do not allow for kids, anybody under 18, or anybody in the school system. And those are 62 plus, and that's a whole category we don't have. That's just what it is. So we're allowed to discriminate, to require that somebody is over 55, but we're not allowed to discriminate legally that there be nobody else in the house under 18, or in the school system. Can't do that. So going forward, to make sure you guys are sort of aware of things as they come up, one of the things Colleen and I talk about is sharing, putting her on the notice list for public notices for applications and decisions for subdivision site plans that have housing. And I would like to hear from you guys when you have updates on capital projects to start with. I would really like to see whenever during the year you have input for the capital improvement plan. It doesn't have to be in our normal window, it can be any time of the year. we have talked about having multiple sort of moments of review. So, everything that's been turned in for the first 3-4 months of the year, everything for the second 3-4 months of the year, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be one single hard, fast deadline, because every part of our community kind of works on different schedules, because they all, the ambulance might get information at a weird time. We don't care, just give us the information. It is only electronic. It's not like we're not carving it in stone. And I would love to come and attend meetings here quarterly or regularly, and I hope that Colleen would be willing to do the same.
We can do that. Yep.
That way we can report out what we learn and what we hear, what are concerns that we're hearing from each other's boards. But I kind of wanted to see how you guys felt about that. If there was more frequent, less frequent.
No, I think, and as long as we're communicating in the interim, I know at the last planning board meeting, there was information asked for that was
quite the list.
Quite the list, and that was just what, I think people were just talking and hearing, and maybe if at the next meeting we can narrow that down. What I'm hearing though, and I think we should do at each meeting, is have what do we need immediately or within the next couple of months. So now you've given us new numbers, so we have to talk, not new numbers, I had already kind of previewed that, and Ken had to, because we knew some of this, but every month it's probably gonna change. But I think what should we be focusing on, and what I'm hearing is that the capital improvement plan is a major priority, and that given the numbers that you're telling us and the numbers we already have, a reasonable person could predict that we might eventually need to do that project, if not more. So we start with putting that in there. And if things change, then to me, what I'm hearing, it's not saying we're actually going to do that. It's just reasonable that we might have to get there within the next couple of years.
Exactly.
No one's holding us to it. It's not going to be, okay.
It's a tool.
Yeah, I get it. So you can plan for impact fees and do
Because we
all
would
that.
also like to keep our tax rate pretty even.
Yeah.
Many of us in this room are probably going, ouch, from our last tax bill, because it was a little unexpected, even though we all knew it was coming. It's still startling to see that big number. If we can help to keep our taxes in a more even keel, that's always better for everybody in our community. And also, in order to put all of these things kind of nest together, the capital improvement plan really does need to be in place if we want to do these impact fees, which will help us manage our growth, will help us invite the people who are moving in to pay for their fair share of the growth. But in order for the capital improvement plan to be in place, we had to have a master plan in place. So the master plan is still our foundational document. Then comes the capital improvement plan. And without the capital improvement plan, we actually can't have the GMO, the growth management units. So if you guys love the growth management ordinance, who doesn't love good growth management ordinance?
We'll prioritize
It's really
this.
important
Yeah.
that you guys give us some kind of plan so that we understand where you are in the evaluate, develop, and implement process.
And looking at this, it doesn't look like there's not a lot of detail necessary. It's just, we already have that. It's just putting it in this
Detail,
place.
you
Yeah.
just need to pull out the part that's capital.
Fill it out, yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And then we can refine it,
Yeah.
right? So
We can change
it's
it.
a swag that we refine further as we get more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. That was very helpful.
In fact, if you go back and look at past plans,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the safety complex is a really great example of how a plan could change from year to year based on the feedback loop about what happens at town meeting.
And the only reason the growth management ordinance is built around schools is because you guys are the most difficult to honor, to pivot quickly. It's not that hard to buy a new police cruiser if we needed one out of the sequence. It's not that hard to add an additional librarian if we need that out of our normal growth, because we just have so many people who need to have that book. To build 5 new classrooms takes a minute. So that's why you guys are here. It's not that this is the only piece that's going to be affected by growth. We're definitely going to need, more police officers and more cruisers with those police officers and in ambulances and EMTs, and fire trucks. I mean, we need all of these things. But you guys are the one that takes the longest to build out, because you guys only have such, like, this much of the year to build. And if you only have this much of the year to build, then it takes a little bit longer.
Thank you. Are
Thank
there
you
any
so
other
much.
questions from anyone? Brian, yeah, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but entries into the capital improvement plan need to be submitted annually each year?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, because things change.
right.
Yep.
Okay, so if nothing changes, does it roll over, or do we have to resubmit?
No,
Okay, that's
please
important.
please
Yeah,
resubmit.
yeah, okay,
Because you'd be surprised.
yeah.
Things really do change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Oh.
Just don't assume it rolls over is the takeaway.
that's
here.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, it
All right.
doesn't roll over.
Right, because as far as we know, you may have decided to go in a different direction.
Yeah. Okay. Before we wrap, since there's so many volunteers, I also just want to say thank you to all the volunteers in here. A lot of people make the town work, and a lot of them are sitting in here tonight, so thank you, everyone. All right.
Thank
We
you very
good?
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
This was really helpful.
And Michelle, we'll be in touch regularly.
Don't worry, always feel free to ask me any questions.
I think you wore red on purpose.
What's that?
Yes.
Your shirt's on fire, our hair's on fire. Can't wait to move into a HOP.
3 more years.
All right, thank you. Good night. Appreciate it.
My husband's
Okay. So that was, we did a little agenda adjustment, but we do still have a budget to talk about tonight too, so saddle up here, team.
I would just like to apologize to everybody for saying to my wife before I left home, I hope this isn't another long meeting.
I knew it was a long one
So,
tonight.
I'll take my lashes for that now.
We'll catch up. How about that?
There we go.
Just look at the policies alone. You should have.
I know, it's like, good grief.
Read and adopt,
11
read
of
and
these?
adopt, read
All
and
right,
adopt.
so we're going to do approval of minutes. This will have to be a roll call because Allison is remote, so it will be a little bit slower. We'll start with October 25th. The following amendments were offered. Page 10, line 38, replace out with our, and page 12, line 41, insert it following with. So I'll make a motion to accept as amended.
I'll second that.
Seconded, thank you by Colleen. All right, Allison, we'll start with you.
Allison, aye.
Can I?
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
And then Tracy, we need you to abstain on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So 4 yays, and then Tracy, abstention, thank you. Okay, very good. We'll go over to non-public, then on October 25th. I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
Seconding.
Very good. All right, Allison, we'll start with you.
Allison, aye.
Can I?
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
Okay, abstain, thank you, very good. All right, so that's it for the meeting minutes. I will open public input at 7:29. We have an empty room, but it's open at 7:29.
I need to jump in before the principal's.
Oh, there is someone over there? Oh, I can't even see her. Sorry, no, I can't even see her head back there. Thank you, okay.
We have something else.
I have
Please.
one. We skipped over resignations.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got right to it, okay.
No problem. This is a letter of resignation. It's from Steve LaBelle. I'm ready to resign from my contract for the 23-24 school year with the Brookline School District, with my last day being November 21st. I'd like to say thank you for trusting me with your students for the last 3 months. Please be assured that the decision was not made lightly. I have spent considerable time reflecting on my goals, aspirations, and the direction I want to take my professional life. The math specialist position has been dynamic, so I feel compelled to explore other avenues that align with my evolving interests and skills. Once again, I thank you for everything, and that's from Steve LaBelle. We have posted the position and are actively recruiting to replace that position.
All right, thank you, sorry about that. Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Steve LaBelle as a math specialist at the Brookline School District with an effective date of November 21st, 2023. Need a second? for that?
I'll second.
Okay, Allison, second, and thank you. Any discussion before we vote?
I mean,
I'm just curious.
he's already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the letter of resignation is a formality. You
Yeah.
can't stop somebody from
Yeah.
resigning. The co-op board has had this happen on 2 occasions this year. They actually, in one of the occasions, decided to vote against it, just to make a point about that. But it's very frustrating. I sat with this gentleman 3 months ago when he came on board, and can attest that we don't necessarily understand all the reasoning behind it. Some of our board members got to meet this individual because he also interviewed for an administrative position. And it's also becoming something that's more common, which is very frustrating, because this will be our 4th resignation during the school year across the SAU. Yeah. Yeah. Some of it's because they're leaving the education environment to go to different sectors because of pay. Others, they've just decided that education is no longer for them, and it's run the gamut from people brand new to us, people 10 years with us, and it's, I know the co-op board has been very frustrated because it's impacted them the most, because what they've lost more often is math and science back to industry. Yeah. So that's the rationale.
Yeah. Okay, so we had talked about this at chairs meeting, so sorry, I forgot that this was a surprise to everyone else. Just for awareness, I do intend to vote no, simply for symbolic reasons. I'm a believer in commitments and seeing your commitment through the year, so I'm just going to say that for the record. You can do whatever you want. It's not going to, like Andy said, it doesn't mean anything, but it's more a symbolic thing. So, anything else before we start? Okay. All those in favor, we'll start, oh, I'm sorry, we have to do roll call, so we'll start, all those in favor. Allison, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Okay, Ken, nay.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
Tracy, aye.
Okay, so,
That's it, we can go back to public input.
thank you. All right, so we are at public input, that it was opened at 7:29, and we will move down to the principal's report now.
Moving along.
Just had to flip through this packet.
Yeah, I know, just,
No time for that.
Good evening, everyone. Our enrollment continues to stay pretty close to where it was before. Really, the only additions have been in our preschool program. We've had some influx in our 3- and 4-year-old classrooms. Going into our calendar of events, we've had a really busy November. We've had parent conferences, so I'd like to thank all the families and the teachers for their time, meeting about the students' performance so far. We had a wonderful professional development day in the district. Most of our classroom teachers participated in OGAP training for math. And we had a RMS safety drill on November 17th, and our school practiced an avoid, deny, defend drill. Not the kind of drill, that's not a drill that we always want to practice. None of them are, but this is a drill that we take really seriously and to protect everybody that's in the school and in our building. And our safety officials were very, very pleased with how we performed that drill. And as I shared with the staff, they did a phenomenal job following through with our procedures and in our training to keep all students safe. And that went really well. Also on November 17th, our grade 3 team performed an assembly for the school. All grade 3 classes performed a skit that was related to the tiger themes that we're promoting this year. And it was really well done. The students did such a great job performing in front of their peers and just summarizing what they learned so far and just acting as peer role models for the younger students in our building. And our grade 2 team had an Abenaki presentation from the Historical Society. We're at the school board meeting. Tomorrow's a field trip to the fire department for our kindergarten group, and then I'll pass it over to Trish.
Thank you very much. I just realized it's not on the paper here, but we do have a picture there from last year. We did have our CSDA turkey trot, so the kids had a lot of great time for that. And I want to thank the parents that were able to come in and volunteer. And grade 6 is going on their field trip to Beaver Brook tomorrow, and it's supposed to go up into the 40s, so that they're looking forward to that. Basically, it'll be an environmental education day. So they're looking forward to that.
Great.
Hey.
Thank you, and I see like so many of these things are supported by our PTO, and I just wanted to acknowledge, I don't know if I can say it on behalf of the board, but I'd like to acknowledge it on behalf of the board, the service that Miranda Terry gave as co-chair of the PTO, and I think she brought a lot of energy, and I just wanted to thank her for her service. I think she just retired from that position, so.
Yeah, our PTO does a wonderful job supporting all of our programming, along with what we've budgeted for. Miranda did a great job. She's still going to be an active part of the PTO, but we've been very lucky with the leadership roles from the PTO over the last 8 or so years. So.
There's also a great hospitality committee with the PTO, and they do something special for each of the teachers and the different groups each month, so it's really nice.
We're lucky to have such a great PTO.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that. We will jump down to our discussions and start with the FY24 revenue expense report.
Okay.
Turn over to you. All right.
So there hasn't been a lot of change since last month. We're still facing the same issues with special education, contracted services, and staffing being costly. As I mentioned last month, we are currently in the budget freeze. The budget freeze means we're only allowed to purchase existing POs that have been created and critical purchases needed for student education and emergency maintenance issues. And in the meantime, we have the current projected fund balance of negative $296,226. So I will be coming to you monthly with the numbers as we go along, and be reporting them to you.
And Donna, with respect to the budget freeze, the teachers typically submit most of those requests and requirements for encumbering in the start of the year around
Correct.
September anyway, right?
Yep.
So, really, this
And we
was
follow that
planned
up by September 30th. We remind them by September 30th, get everything encumbered, figure out what you need. If you need it, something in the spring, encumber it now.
Yep.
So we stay on top of them,
Right.
trying to.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions at all?
Yeah, I guess not having gone through this process, what does the overage mean for us, having this large overage?
At this point, it doesn't really mean a lot because there's still very much volatility in the budget. Because when we say we've encumbered every service for every special ed child. Sometimes those services change, sometimes they're not needed as much. But to be proactive and to cover that, we encumber the total amounts. We've also encumbered all of your snow plowing, your oil, a lot of variables that we don't know. It's, as much as it's not great to be in the negative, it's about the same place it was last year at this point. I think Donna's number last month, it was actually about 100,000 more in the negative, so.
All right.
And again, it's, I feel confident between the special ed trust and those mechanisms that we have, that we don't have an issue at this point. And if you recall from last year, we kind of went through the same thing and then didn't even need to touch any of the trusts. And I think it's more because of using the encumbrance method, every dollar for oil has been encumbered, and, if it's a good winter, we'll have a significant savings. If we get tons of storms, sometimes we go over in plowing, come in under in oil. So I really think, January is a kind of a telling point because we'll have another discussion with the special ed staff and they'll kind of know more about the individuals that may be enrolled with us this summer. And because oftentimes what we also find is that districts that they came from don't have the same services that we provide. So as a result, we're able to assist more within the district and not do as much outside services. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, why don't we move over to the FY25 budget discussion then?
Yes, not a lot has changed. We have included it under personnel, obviously the teacher we hired this year because of the enrollment going up. We did add a reading and writing / case manager that we need for special education based on our student populations. We still are maintaining at this point the MTSS social worker and behavioral person. And again, that would be working with the Hollis School District as well. But we think that would give us another piece to the puzzle of the mental health piece for our students. We have a pre-K coordinator. Our 3- and 4-year-old programs in both districts are growing leaps and bounds. And that's a rolling enrollment, so it's, once you turn 3, you're allowed to enter the program. So it's not like a child for kindergarten, you need to be 5 in September. So again, by sharing that coordinator, we can start to really focus in on those pre-K issues, which are very consistent between districts. And it's interesting that what we're starting to see is a child coming to us with a greater level of disability, but children who really excel and start to make tremendous strides when there is an early intervention. So our needs are changing within the program, but also our success rate is also changing. And that success rate from maybe learning the curriculum, because many of these children are in our programs for social reasons. So it's a very uplifting place to visit. If you're ever in one of the buildings and you get an opportunity to go visit those classrooms, it's special. In terms of the computers, is basically the exact same as the last time. We have shifted as much as we can into our regional REAP grant. Then that takes us down to the end of the new items. So right now, the operating budget is up by $555,601, which is 4.82%. If we pass all the warrants, it would be $696,435, or 5.73. Kelly is also, under the final warrant articles to the left, just giving you a total if you were to look at a bond and provided you with interest rates that are there. I think in December we could spend more time when the finance committee's here and just start to time out when we want to look at a bond, because if we're going to do I'll say, a growth project as well, there is some economy of scale because we'd have the same vendors on site. So something that, for boilers separately might not be as expensive if I'm building 5 classrooms and doing boilers. Now, I know they both don't qualify for growth management, but at the same time, we may get a better bang for our buck, and you may get a better interest rate on the bonds, because it does seem to be trending that they could be going down again in 24, 25. So more to come on that. What I was hoping the board could provide is any direction that you'd like to see, more around the overall dollar amount of percentages. Do you have a target that you would like to see based on what input you're maybe hearing in the community? And then what I would do is go back and sit with Gina, Kelly, Lauren, and the principals for round 4 and try to reach that target. And I'm open, and I'll come back to you and say, this is what you would lose to get to this percentage, and then this is what you would lose if you wanted to go. So I'll kind of do it maybe by 0.5% with 2 or 3 rounds, so that way you have knowledge there. I don't think I really have much wiggle room on the personnel items.
Yeah, that's 50% of the budget.
Yep. And those are all based on student needs. We already are using that teacher. And the student population that right now, one of the reasons our budget is up is we are doing contracted services that reading teacher would be able to do at a much reduced rate.
In the preschool teacher.
In the preschool, yeah. Yeah.
I was going to ask about the preschool teacher. So what would be the role, not the teacher, the coordinator, what's the role of the preschool, pre-K coordinator? Just in...
So the preschool coordinator is, for those of you who know preschool, it's kind of its own entity. It's its own kind of animal, both with special education and regular education, all the requirements that go along with it. Some of the laws are different, some of the compliance pieces are very different. So having a preschool coordinator across both districts, we're able to streamline all of our programming, all of our compliance, all those pieces, so that oversight, having someone specific to that is beneficial. I've kind of taken on preschool this year to kind of make sure that we're streamlining as much as possible and set up preschool in a way that we can kind of pass that to someone who can specialize in it. That preschool coordinator will also be teaching a halftime section in Hollis. So we're taking a portion. So they'll be teaching a halftime morning section plus doing the coordinator duties across both districts.
So would it really be a 50-50 split then?
For that second half of the position, it
Okay,
is.
so you're paying them on a
Correct.
teaching scale for that, and then you're paying
Correct.
them on an administrator scale, and that's what we're splitting.
Yep, and it's, it's kind of like a tweener position, yep.
And the special ed coordinators can't do that role anymore, or?
So the scope of the special ed administrator for the elementary school districts, you're looking at, if you include the preschool in that pre-K through 6, it is really not a sustainable position, because like I said, preschool itself has its own set of laws, compliance, structures that are vastly different than even what exists for K through 6. And the fact that there's one administrator for 7 grade levels. That's an incredible task, looking at all the special ed and student services that they're working with the principals and the other administrators on as well. So it really makes most sense so that preschool doesn't kind of fall through. We're able to kind of give preschool its own attention and entity to prepare them as well as possible entering kindergarten.
But right now, aren't we paying for half of a preschool teacher on contract?
Correct. So that's a separate piece. So this year for FY24, we had such an increase in our enrollment due to our increased needs that we put in a halftime preschool teacher. We were not able to hire. We still are actively looking for someone who we can employ, but we've had to contract out for that position.
Right. So we would need a half a preschool teacher plus a coordinator. So it just seems like we would need the teacher over the coordinator, and Hollis is getting half of a teacher and a half of a coordinator. I guess I just see us needing that more than the half of a coordinator.
Well, we currently have the half time preschool teacher that's going to stay. That is still in the budget for FY25. But it isn't a new item because we currently have it for FY24.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is a little discomfort with the 50-50 split when they're
Yeah,
all-
when we still need, when we're still.
The reality is if the person is teaching in Hollis and coordinating in Hollis, they're gonna be in Hollis more than they are in Brookline.
So the way
So
that we
unless it's-
structure the program,
Yeah.
so the way that we structure the program is that Fridays, there's no preschool. So we use Fridays as meeting days and planning days and prep days. So right now, I split my time on Fridays between Brookline and Hollis. So what we would do, so again, the same way that you have your special ed administrator in Brookline working in 2 buildings, right? They look at their time and they plan their week accordingly. So, and I would definitely be working with the preschool coordinator and such to kind of help with that timing and that planning. So the afternoons, Monday through Thursday, that pre-K coordinator will be available, and that time can be split accordingly between Hollis and Brookline. And then Fridays, how we structure meetings and those kind of pieces would be split accordingly as well. So we would make sure that that time is accounted for. And truth be told, we haven't hired that position, right? So we are going to be hiring for the halftime position here in Brookline. We have to, I guess we would, I don't know if we have flexibility with that, we'd have to kind of look at that in a different lens. But we are still going to be actively hiring to fill the contractor position here with a teacher who's employed by us, and then we'd be structuring the pre-K coordinator's time as equitably as possible between the two.
Would it be the pre-K coordinator who's responsible for all of the, because I understand that when a child turns 3 is when they're able to start accessing assessments through the school district. And so is that something that is, I guess I just don't know how that works, but would that be something that the pre-K coordinator would be involved with, like doing assessments or just coordinating assessments?
They would be the LEA for the meeting, so it's kind of that oversight piece for the process. So when you look at the actual evaluations and such, those are conducted by the teachers, by the case managers.
Okay.
Or the speech pathologist or occupational therapist,
Right, right,
whoever's
right.
needed in the assessment.
Okay.
So Andy, you asked about budget, and I'm thinking so my question kind of goes to you, Lauren, a little bit. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a tough budget cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right away the question is, why do we need this role now when we've been able to do it for as long as we've been involved? I don't think we've changed the amount of students that go into preschool. So what changed now that we need to do that?
Well, we have had an increase in enrollment in preschool.
We've increased the number
Enough
of
so that
students
we've
that can
had to
go in
add
it?
extra sections, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, in addition to changing compliance laws, that in addition to the fact that that special education administrator at the elementary level is spread very thin, that the process piece to prepare them going into the elementary, there's a lot of components to it, that it would be an important role. But we can discuss that further, and, if I continue to do preschool myself, I'll do it myself. I mean, and we'll kind of go from there, but
Yeah.
we can discuss that.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, my concern is just overall, we have the part-time hourly lunch assistants, we have the preschool coordinator, we're paying for contracted paras. I see us struggling to get staff and being over budget in that area. And, maybe it's not apples to apples or oranges to oranges, but I'm just concerned that, we're putting in additional staff into the budget when we're struggling to fill our own staff needs as it is. And so, it's, while the budget wouldn't be spent, it still goes into the budget and people still look at it when they're, when we're talking about it. And so I don't want to cut it out of the budget, and then we just lost Mr. LaBelle, and I've heard concerns from parents, maybe we do need some more additional help in math in the school. And, we're investing in a math program, we're investing in SEL, but the SEL coordinator, it looks like, I don't know, are they just at CSDA? Do they get to, float between the two schools? So I just have some questions around some of the staffing stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we can go through all of that again. We have no problem justifying the staffing piece. I don't disagree with you about the concern of hiring staff. I think that's gonna go on for the next 5 to 10 years. I just don't.
I mean, I do too.
Yeah, but at the same time, we historically, other than paraprofessionals, with a posting in the March timeframe, tend to see candidates come here because our pay scale is usually slightly better, and we're known as a destination district.
And I don't want to lose sight of the warrant article for the BASA contract that we're going to talk about later tonight. The hope is that we will finally be able to make up ground that we've been horribly behind, even our own 2 districts. And so that is why we cannot hire. We lose our paraprofessionals to either the agency, and they come back to our building and work for someone else to make the rate that we'd like to pay them, or our other 2 districts. So the hope is that assists us in the hiring of those positions, and so that we're not paying 2 to 3 times as much for the positions we've budgeted for.
I mean, I hope that is the case with the paras, but, the other 4 positions that we lost, right, Mr. LaBelle and then the others, those were not paras, right? I mean, so, I mean,
I don't, I guess, understand the question. Mr. LaBelle chose to resign, we still have the position. We'll advertise and hopefully hire somebody to do the math specialist position. I can't guarantee, because we've never seen a hiring market like this.
I know, I'm not sure what we can, yeah, I'm not sure what we can do to, yeah.
Right, and if you think, last year, our voters supported one of the largest contracts historically for teachers
I know.
to make us very competitive. It's just, as a profession, like many professions coming out of COVID, there is a lack of people that are looking to do the jobs. But from my standpoint, I was looking at $12,000 represents 1/10 of 1%. So a 0.5% is about $60,000. That's kind of what I was going to use for my chart of reductions, and then the board would kind of have like, I would say, a la carte
Yeah.
to discuss.
Yeah, I think we need to do that, I think.
I unfortunately think we need to come down some. I
That's
wish,
okay.
but I'm really concerned about this cycle this year. And I know that we had a really big year last year, and I'm expecting some pushback, and I think we need to recognize that and try to lean in on that as much as we can.
I think for Brookline voters and Brookline parents, the co-op and the amount that we're expected to pay into the co-op, given the formula that's used, is just really hurting people in taxes. And so, but we're gonna feel a little bit of the brunt of that,
We'll
even
feel
though
it here,
it's so
yeah.
much more to fund the co-op. And so, I hope that can somehow be rectified. It's not like Hollis is not feeling it either, but, so.
No, we've had equal access from the tax bills going out from both communities.
Yeah.
But I mean, am I in line? I mean.
Yeah.
So like 0.5, it would bring us down to 4.3%, okay? And then 1% would bring us down to 3.8, that'd be 120,000. You know, we can look at that. I do have to say that some of the positions, and I'll use one that seems very simple, the lunch monitors, I'm really hoping that makes it through, because right now I have my principals doing lunch duty, which is about an hour and a half a day, that I would rather have somebody making an hourly wage than the salary. So, but at the same time, I'm afraid I'm gonna put those in, and I might not be able to fill them, because other districts that have them aren't being filled, so I'm trying to balance that. I think that will be the case, but,
But we also heard when we were talking about volunteers and the volunteer policy that we had a really robust volunteer program. So can we call on the community? You know, the community said, and we've heard, the community, you know, is suffering with taxes right now. So please, you know, come do lunch duty, you know? I don't know with that, I mean.
That is something that we've utilized in the past. It's difficult to guarantee that it's there regularly. It's also, there's training involved. There's also getting to know the kids and, you know, who needs what support, getting water, you know, identifying their signs. So consistency is really important for that position. But one thing to remember, you know, we put the positions in the budget, just like we had those 4 MTSS paras for however long that we can never fill. And that what we do in the end when we can't fill them is the money goes back to the taxpayers. So it's not like we then buy a car instead. You know, the money is not, you know, it's encumbered and then it's released and is returned if that position can't be hired for. And that's where we've seen, you know, a great deal of money be returned to the taxpayers, especially at the co-op level, for some positions that were unfilled in the past few years. So while that's not great in terms of operating the school district, I think we have to request what we need to run the schools, and then hope for the best and do our best in recruiting, and be prudent about certainly not spending for what was not budgeted for.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is the personnel stuff, I said, about roughly half of the budget increase. I wouldn't touch those, and I would look at elsewhere. That's my opinion. I don't know what the rest of the board feels like, but like, if we can shave even some off, take it down, every little bit counts, because like I said,
Look at everything.
yeah.
well, I'll go back like I said, and I'll come back kind of with my recommendations, and obviously the board can choose from whichever column they want
Yeah.
based on questions or input and data. Really the only one that's kind of etched in stone is the kindergarten teacher that we already hired, because we're already, that's one of the reasons why our budget, is over. If you look at, we're saying we're 200 and something over, but we had to spend 97,000 when you do a fully loaded
Yeah.
benefits package. And that number is your fully loaded, so that's your New Hampshire retirement, your a health plan, as well as your teaching salary. And we budget the teaching salary at Mass to Step 7, and then sometimes we're able to hire the candidate of choice is less than that, other times the candidate of choice is more than that, and we balance it all out. So I will bring that back in December. We have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee, where we're looking to cut there. I'm guessing I'm probably not gonna come forward with a recommendation for the bond. Like I said, I think I'd rather package that all
Yeah.
together, make sure that we get it to the CIP so that they can
Yep.
account for any dollars that might be eligible that we might not be aware of.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Thank
Yeah, I do have a question, because we talked about the math specialists a couple times, and I failed to ask it earlier. Are we seeing any impacts, I know it's not budget, any impacts for math specialists right now in RMMS for students, whether they need help catching up or advanced students, or any impacts there right now?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we simply don't have the bodies. So what happens, instead of, let's say you and I were supposed to be pulled out.
Yep.
We're gonna remain in our classroom, and the teacher's gonna do as much enrichment as they can. But I don't think there's, I mean, Dan is,
I thought that was the answer. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
was not assuming anything.
I mean, we're still, days where our principals are the substitutes to make us run. I don't know how I get that across to families, and it's not just Brookline, it's everywhere. And it's not just education, it's a lot of industries that are really struggling. We're gonna see our usual influx of college kids coming home.
Yep.
And those will help
Yeah, I
us.
really like your idea with Riviera partnering there.
Yeah, we're trying to do some different things there as well. So I'll bring that back to you next month, and that almost is to the point of, after that, it's the public hearing, and we're already moving forward.
Right. Okay, great. We have done the growth management and primary election date discussion already, so unless there's any saved thoughts there, I'm going to jump to the annual meeting calendar.
In your board packet is just the Brookline dates to post a notice, and most of this is just done by the business office. The big pieces for us are the public hearing dates, which are the 10th, and a snow date on the 11th. Our first deliberative session is the 7th of February, again with a snow date on the 9th. Once we get through that and things are finalized by the people at the deliberative, we have the annual district meeting date is voting date, which is 3/12/24. So we're in good shape. Kelly provides you all the legal pieces for why each hearing has to be there. It's a very complex calendar to get through with the 3 districts and different budget dates. And just with regard to the budget, the big piece for the co-op, we will not be having a significant warrant article, but we will be having a teacher's contract. So that is still being discussed and negotiated. So
Okay.
those are the dates for the annual meeting. I did want to provide you also just a clarification on the tax cap. I spoke to Jim O'Shaughnessy, our attorney. If you wanted to remove the tax cap, that's what you would have to do. It would take a 2/3 majority to do that. You can't segment out
Okay.
special ed costs or things like that. If you wanted to change the percentage, he can look at that, but tax cap is very much governed under the Department of Revenue. So it's just a matter, and again, it's only going to be specific years that are going to be difficult for us, and they're going to be typically when we have a large influx of special ed. This year, our numbers appear to be down compared to last year, but that's because a lot of that cost is just going to the co-op. So we still have the cost under special ed, it's just going to be in a different budget.
So even if we, so there's no way to create a tax cap that's for non-special ed?
That's correct.
Yeah, I really like that idea. It's too
I
bad.
know. I was like looking back at my notes, I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, okay, I'm looking at like when the warrant articles are due and stuff, like when can we do that?
So, it would be up to the board to decide if you want to put an article on. I'm not sure how that would be received.
Especially this
Yeah.
year.
I
Yeah.
feel like it would, yeah.
Right, so I'm not recommending it. And I think the other thing we try to do is, the more we can keep the article streamlined to what I'll call the essentials, I think it will be better to gain support.
I agree. Okay, thanks. It's 8:05. I'm going to close public input. I forgot to do that. Okay. We are over to the BEST negotiations. Do you want me to put a motion out first? Would that be best before we discuss it? All right. So I'll make a motion that the board ratify the tentative agreement between the Brookline School Board and the Brookline Education Support Staff Association, NEA/NH, also known as BESA. Need a second for that, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right.
I guess I'll speak to it. So, as we discussed already, we approached the BESA group, our support staff, and looked to engage in conversation regarding compensation only. The contract continues for 2 more years, but we clearly are having great difficulties hiring and retaining staff, to the point where we're ending up spending 2 to 3 times as much on the support staff positions. So it was in everyone's best interest to present a new hourly wage table. And when we did so, we wanted to also make it so that it was helpful to the SAU as a whole, for the HR department and the business office. So we restructured the classifications of employees to better match both co-op and Hollis, and presented a table that was far more comparable to the co-op support staff table, and presented it to them, and then maintained the same increase that we had already agreed 2 years prior for FY26. And they accepted. We had a tentative agreement, and their group ratified. So at this point, we're just looking for support from the board.
Okay. Any further questions on this?
If we're restructuring to try to align more with the co-op, I know one of the things that we talked about a lot, and I know it's a huge cost increase, but was there any opportunity to create benefited positions?
So the conversation was limited just to
Compensation.
To compensation alone. However, based on student needs, when students arrive with needs that allow or that require a paraprofessional for a certain number of hours, that position legally requires that we offer benefits. So we have slowly, in a way that's more cost-effective, integrated benefits positions within the district, and looking at the population and how population has changed in our school district over time, I envision that will just increase year after year.
So if like students need like assistance with transportation, like then that adds hours to the day.
Then the day is extended and they
Okay.
become benefits eligible, yeah.
Okay, excellent. I just know that that's like a huge piece of the problem in trying to attract.
Sure, and just, for comparison purposes, we looked into providing very minimal coverage for support staff in another district, and it was over $1 million. So it's not something that anyone can just jump on board with, despite the fact that we want to. So a more prudent approach is looking at specific student needs and adding them in a more slow fashion.
Okay.
Okay, we'll roll call vote. Allison, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, aye.
I say aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Passes 5-0. All right, buckle up. We've got some policy to do. We'll start with JICK. I'm just going to put motions on the floor every time to keep it rolling. So I'll make a motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy JICK, People Safety and Violence Prevention Bullying.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Kelly, did you want to speak to it, or do you want me to speak to it?
Yep, I'm trying to find my notes, sorry. So on JICK, when we last discussed this at the Brookline School Board, I wasn't unfortunately at that meeting, and I know that Colleen had some concerns about, I just wanted to make sure we addressed them, about, I think about the waiver of notification.
Correct.
Yes.
And that was in,
It's right here, it says the superintendent may, within a 48-hour time period, grant the principal a waiver from the requirement that the parents of the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator be notified of the filing of a report. A waiver may only be granted if the superintendent deems such a waiver to be in the best interest of the victim or perpetrator. Any waiver granted shall be in writing, and I just said that didn't sit well. Andy had explained that it's never actually occurred, but from the perspective of an incident that requires a filing of a report, and I think, Gina, is this the one you had talked about that is also just standard
State
language?
statute.
Correct.
State statute.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make it well-written sometimes, it doesn't make it well thought out, but that was helpful information. Still doesn't sit well with me, knowing that we really would rarely do that. I mean, to not notify the parents of an alleged victim of a filing of a report. I don't know. I guess, and there was mention about violent household and stuff like that, where you might, and obviously that makes sense, I get that, but, so for me, I mean, I can sort of just trust the people that we work with, that would only happen, because of, for safety reasons, given that this is state statute language. So, it's very interesting. Maybe it's because I'm just reading the context, but if everybody else is okay with it, knowing that if it hasn't been used, it would only be used in rare circumstances, I'm okay with that.
yeah, I guess my only question too, maybe, is when the waiver is granted, and the waiver is granted in writing, like, who does that written waiver go to? Goes to the principal and just stays?
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
in an incident file?
It's
It's
attached,
doc-
it's
it's
attached to
docu-
the bullying document.
Okay.
Okay, are we okay to vote, or this will be the adopt?
Can I just ask one quick question? I was looking at something, and one of the other districts, Pelham, they had, a form that's, a pupil safety and violence prevention. They had it's called JIC R1. I don't know if we ever had discussed having something that was, or I don't know if this is like the appropriate policy to also talk about it, but it's an alleged bullying incident reporting form, that someone, I don't know if it's someone else can do
So
it.
we absolutely have all those forms. In fact, all of our forms have just been rewritten, revamped, and updated across the board with substantial training for all of our administrators. We just, as a district, don't put those forms as listed within our policies.
Oh, okay. So this is for something, this is for like an administrator, this isn't like
Correct.
if I as like a parent saw, oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Allison, we'll start with you.
Allison, I.
Ken, I.
Kelly, I?
Tracy, I.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that one passes and is adopted. We're going to move on now to EB. I'll make a motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy EB, Workplace Safety Program and Joint Loss Management Committee.
I will second that.
Thank you.
And this is another policy that is recommended by our legal representation. It's a required by law policy, and there was no changes in the last policy committee meeting. So unless anyone has any objections, we would like to adopt it.
Okay. Allison, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
You don't sound so great.
Sorry, I keep trying to mute before I die from coughing.
I didn't hear Colleen. Yeah, so Kelly, aye.
Tracy, aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, 5-0. All right, so we're over to EHB.
All right, so EHB is another,
Should we have a motion?
oh,
Yes.
Sorry.
I will make a motion to amend policy EHB data records retention in its entirety by replacing it with the copy provided with the agenda and accept the second reading as amended.
I'll second that.
Thanks.
so the only changes that you'll see, in this document were, changes that were, brought forward by, the Hollis Board made changes in Section A, paragraphs 1 and 3. Basically, sorry, let me grab this. About students' graduation or permanent exit. So this, the language as this is written for like a K through 12 district. And so both the Hollis School Board and they kind of caught this and brought this to our attention. So we want to make changes consistent with them that it's instead of being a student's graduation, it would be a permanent exit from the district or the adult student. And then I think the other part was.
So just to explain a little bit more, we always followed the legal requirements, but the policy just didn't explicitly identify that at a point in time, it becomes the adult student that makes the decisions about the existence of the records. And so whether it's the adult student or if there's a court-appointed guardian at that point, we're going to do what we have to do. So this just more clearly identifies what it is that we would do upon those circumstances. And Lauren had this vetted through legal to make sure that it was, that we were covered.
Sounds good.
Okay. Allison, we'll start with you.
Allison, aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Tracy, aye.
Thank you.
All right. Next one, I'll make a motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt EHBR, Local Records Retention Schedule.
I'll second that.
So this, I think is again, what we've been following. And I don't think there were any changes to this.
No changes. And it's all driven by RSA, so even if we wanted to change it, we can't. This is an example of a regulation that we really don't have, but because it is so significant and so many policies reference the retention schedule, and we had an audit done in co-op, I believe, that specifically requested this document be more publicly available, we decided to, throughout all three of our policy committees, just go through the rounds of a typical policy.
All right, let's fast track this one. Allison.
Aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Tracy, aye.
Great. That one is adopted. Our next one is EHAA. So I'll make a motion to accept the second reading, waive the third and adopt policy EHAA, computer security, email, and internet communications.
I'll second that.
So the only changes that we made at the last policy meeting is, I think, just across the board, we're trying to be consistent with the headers for each policy to reference related policies in the header. So we added the C also with the related policies, and that is the only change.
You can see that we read this one every 5 years.
Yeah, I know. I figured out what you were laughing at finally, because I was like, I'm glad we see Principal Dobe coming back here.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an adoption as well. To accept the second reading of policy KF, community use of school facilities and fields policy.
I'll second that.
All right, so we'll have some discussion here probably.
I have too many tabs open.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So I think that we thought that we had brought this forward at the last school board meeting, and then we realized that we hadn't. And the major change in this policy is just addition of the fee schedule and linking that to the actual policy. Again, that would be in line with like a procedure that we don't necessarily always discuss with policies, but we felt like for ease of access for people, we wanted that to be in here. And I think the last reading in August, we talked about, that's when we had added the language about kitchen staff and who needs to be present if the kitchen's being used, et cetera.
Okay.
So this is a read and adopt?
This is a second with one more still.
Oh.
Unless you want to alter it and read and adopt it.
I'd like to make a motion, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we accept second reading with adoption of policy KF.
Okay, so second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy KF, and I'll second you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on that one? All right, Allison, we'll start with you.
Allison, aye.
Ken, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Great. Okay. Next one, I'll make a motion to accept the first reading of policy EHAB, data governance and security as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, so this one, there were actually two changes to RSAs that were part of this current policy update and then the last year's policy update that we just didn't quite get to. So it's a 2-for-1. Lots of definitions were added. Some additional policies were added for reference, but specifically cybersecurity incidents were identified, defined, et cetera. If you look in section B, section 1, the plan was already presented, so we did a strike through of June 30th, 2019, as it seemed irrelevant. Additionally, there are some provisions about students participating in with parental consent for platforms required for career planning. Some of the laws forbid students from accessing some of these programs, but yet there's a desire to have some of these programs. And so there was an amendment to the law, and that's part of it. Of course, it's with parental consent. And then it really just defines what happens when there's an investigation and who is notified, et cetera. So those are all straight from RSAs over the past 2 years, and we're bringing it forward. It's specifically RSA 31103B. We're bringing it forward for first read.
Any questions? We good? All right. Allison, over to you.
Allison, aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Tracy, aye.
Okay, so that's through its first reading. Our next one is make a motion to accept the first reading of policy EBB, School Safety Program.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a brand-new policy for us, so although nothing is underlined, it's because the entire policy is brand new, but the content really wasn't. It's what was displaced, if you will, from EB, when EB went from a school safety program into the Joint Loss Management Committee. So this is stuff that we have in place for the most part, a comprehensive safety program, and then additional components of this will become, or became brand new to us this year, such as the Sports Injury Emergency Action Plan for schools that have students in grades 4 and up. So we have one for CSDA. It was part of a safety plan that we uploaded. And that's essentially it. So it's required by law, but it's really, it's just our safety program.
And our safety program already covered all of this?
For the most part, like I said, there was the addition of the Sports Injury Emergency Action Plan that we did develop this summer, and had that in place by the date required.
So that will be a new policy, JLCJA, which is
Correct.
not ready.
Nope, but you'll see it next time we bring forward a new policy.
We're going to be talking about that at our next policy meeting.
All
So,
right, can't wait.
Me either.
So, Andy, you have a delegation of authority. Is that a standing delegation of authority to like Gina or others, or is that?
It pretty much is to Gina.
It's just, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, the only other way, if it was something involving special ed, I'd probably delegate to
Yeah.
Ron and be it.
But it's not a standing thing. You have to put that every time you're out. I know for I have a standing DOA for signature type stuff now. If I'm gone for whatever reason, they can pull that to not have continuity. Do you have that, or that's what I'm just curious about?
Well, there's a signature stamp.
Okay.
That they call me and grant permission to use the stamp. Or, pretty much when I'm out, I've delegated that to Gina, because the reality is she calls me. And it's what we need to do.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other questions? Allison, over to you.
Allison, aye.
Ken, aye.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, aye?
Tracy, aye.
All right. On to IHBA. So I'll make a motion to accept the first reading of policy IHBA, Programs for Pupils with Disabilities, as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, so this policy, there were some
It's the worst written.
requirements, and then some were just sort of revamped. So if you look at the bullets, those are brand new. It used to be in a lengthy paragraph that was convoluted and difficult to understand what parental rights were. So it was reworded in an attempt to make it clear for what the rights were. The last paragraph, it was amended to free and appropriate education, just as a better way to describe the education that we are required to provide. And then we amended it to make it appropriate for the Brookline School District because it was generically adopted prior as if we were a K-12 district. So we said that which student reaches 3 years of age shall continue until the student ages out of the Brookline School District. And then we removed the component, which is at the discretion of the superintendent, yada, 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 until age 21, because those are not our students in the Brookline School District. They certainly are Brookline residents, but then they become they become co-op students. So this was brought forward under a policy update based on the change to the age 21, which really didn't impact the Brookline School District, but in reviewing the policy, it made sense to make these updates.
Okay.
Can I just ask that when it says free appropriate education, just because of the state of things in New Hampshire, that it's free appropriate public education throughout the document? There's just a couple places where it says free appropriate education, and like the beginning of it is correct, the district shall provide a free appropriate, so it's FAPE, public education.
Yep.
So there's just a couple of other times where public isn't in there and you wouldn't want somebody to decide.
Well, that's a different policy.
Yeah. Okay. I just think it's just
Yep,
continuity.
absolutely.
Thanks.
The only other, the last bullet is just says review procedure. So the system shall include notice of the right to review procedure. I don't understand is there more to that, or am I just being slow with it?
So the notice is the right to all these components, including a review procedure of the whole proceedings. So a third-party review of process.
Right.
So is there an article we're missing or something? Review it just,
It's the worst.
Yeah.
review the procedure, review.
I'm telling you, it's better than what it was.
No, I believe you,
It
right.
definitely looks like you fixed a lot, yeah.
I just throw it out there. I know it's
I bet
only
you
the first
probably
reading.
supposed to be review procedures and policies or
Yeah.
something. I don't know what that means.
No, we
It's
didn't.
not
Make it
policy.
three bullets.
That's
right?
what I was gonna
Just
say.
do three
Right.
bullets.
Just
Take on
add,
the fourth bullet and just say,
put review procedure up where it says and.
right, so the right to be represented by legal
With the
counsel
legal-
and review procedure.
Sorry, too many people are speaking.
So-
What are you saying?
So we just gotta take out the last bullet.
Procedure up here and just keep it in 3 bullets instead of 4, is what they're recommending.
But it's a separate,
Is it separate?
yeah.
Separate.
So then,
Then leave it.
Or put the and.
'Cause
down
it's
on the
not-
fourth bullet.
what are we bringing
Looking at
next
the
up
safeguards
for
and
another
making sure
reading?
this is okay.
Anyway, we'll discuss
Yep.
on policy. It's a
Yep,
first read.
That's my feedback, so,
Great.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'll clarify what it's in reference to,
Thanks.
and then we'll update it to make it
Yeah.
sound great.
All right.
We definitely spent a lot of time in policy.
On that one? Yeah.
On that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just because like, the commas and the semicolons, like definitely a little bit mind-boggling.
Okay, Allison, over to you.
Allison, I.
Ken, I.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
Tracy, I.
Thank you. On to the next. I'll make a motion to amend policy IHBAA, special education determination of specific learning disability in its entirety by replacing it with a copy provided with the agenda and accept the second reading as amended.
I'll second that.
Thanks.
So this is another example of how policies stop in November, because we had a first reading last November, and we thought we'd bring it back
Oh,
this
wow.
November. Well, what happens is we get caught in the budget and everything,
Right.
and then things get lost. But anyway, the only change between last November and this November is it was brought forward with another board that it would be helpful to direct parents to where to find all the information so that they don't feel like they're left out there with no information. And so we identify that additional resources for families, et cetera, et cetera. So that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Allison, over to you.
Allison, I.
Ken, I.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
Thank you.
All right, we did it. That was the last one. Okay.
Fabulous.
Do we need any non-public
We
tonight?
don't, which means we're going to finish ahead of schedule.
Look at that. Okay, so we do need, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Great. And we can- Kelly did that. Kelly got that one. We do need to do a roll call, though. So Allison, over to you.
Aye.
Ken, I.
Colleen, aye.
Kelly, I.
And we are, whoops, sorry, Tracy, thank you. We are done at 8:33.
Just so you know, all know my